Welcome. I'm your host, Henri Arslanian, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Future of Money podcast. Again, as many of you know, thank you for being such loyal listeners. I'm very excited to say that now this podcast is in over 160 different countries, and shared with the 500,000 of you that follow me every week. So really, guys, a really big thank you for all the support over the last couple of months with this podcast. I'm very excited today because we have a very special guest on the show. Whenever there's new reports or interesting developments that come up, I like to cover it because I think it becomes quite interesting from that perspective. And today, as many of you know, we like to go with this podcast really deep in some of the big ideas, trends, and developments we are seeing in the field of crypto. And today, I'm very excited to have as our guest Kim Grauer, who's the Director of Research at Chainalysis, really to come and talk about really two main topics. One of them is really what's happening on the broader topic of crypto crime and the bad boy activity that we're seeing in the crypto space. And second is really regarding a recent report from Chainalysis on what they call the 2022 Geography of Cryptocurrency report. Really some interesting data that came out of it. So I really wanted to make sure we cover it today. Kim, welcome to the Future of Money podcast.
Hi, thanks so much for having me here today.
By the way, and maybe for the benefit of our audience is, of course, many people will know you as a director of research at Chainalysis. But one thing people may not know about you is that you're a massive, you love surfing and you're a big ocean person from what I understand, you spend a lot of your weekends from sailing to scuba diving. I don't know how you do that in Queens, but great to have you with us on the show today, Kim.
Yeah, I'm obsessed with the ocean. It's my happy place. You can go surfing in the Rockaways out in Queens. A lot of people don't know that, but there's a lot of beautiful, there's the Hudson River and there's a lot of ocean exposure in New York, believe it or not.
Here we go. Kim, there's a lot of stuff. By the way, for the people watching this on YouTube, I'm literally in a hotel room right now in Singapore. That's why you can see my bed in the background. There's been a busy week in Asia this week with the Hong Kong FinTech Week and Singapore FinTech Festival. There's numerous conferences. So I know it's not the usual background that you'll see in some of my other episodes. But let's jump right in, Kim. I'm very excited, I have to say, that Chainalysis has produced a lot of interesting reports over the years. But let's start with the topic of crypto crime. Correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I read recently, 2022 is so far a new record when it comes to crypto crime. I was reading recently that we almost hit $3 billion in hacks. And actually, the vast majority of that has actually happened in the DeFi space and on cross-chain bridges. But could you share with the audience, where are we right now in 2022 in crypto crime? And what are some of the big trends you're seeing? And also the scale of it. Is it as bad as some of the data that I just provided?
So very, very strong start in terms of calling out and talking about the amount of hacking happening in the crypto space. We're at unprecedented levels right now. The 2022 is actually not overall reaching all-time highs in terms of criminal activity in general, because hacking is not the only type of crime that we're interested in. It's definitely the most important type of crime because of the rates at which it's growing. But Hacktober, as we call it, was the biggest month for hacking this year so far, which is something that we were not really expecting. We kind of were hoping that DeFi hacking would start trending down, since last year was also a really big year for DeFi hacking growth. But here we are today, where we're seeing 3 billion hacked so far this year across a variety of different attack vectors. A majority of the victims are DeFi protocols, people just exploiting the open source vulnerabilities and running away with billions of dollars.
And obviously, there was a lot of these big, high-profile hacks, from Wormhole to the Run and Bridge, Nomad, BNB Chain. It's the first time I hear the name Hacktober. I never heard that before. Obviously, there was the BNB one, right? Which obviously was a big one. Why do you think DeFi hacks are trending up? Because you would expect that the industry would get better and better, protocols would get better and better, in the same way that I would argue that the level of hacks on centralized exchanges has gone down because centralized players have got better and better. Why do you think so? Why is hacking on DeFi protocols increasing versus decreasing?
It's a great question, and it's something that we were also surprised to see. We had pointed out last year that it was the year of the DeFi hack. It was the fastest growing type of crime that we track, and the reason why DeFi hacking is so popular right now is, I think, a variety of reasons, and I'll just point to a few of them. One is that there's a new attack vector when it comes to DeFi. And that is the fact that most of the code that is powering these different contracts, these different businesses, is all open source. You could download the code base of anything of a smart contract or a lending protocol or anything in the DeFi space, and you can look for vulnerabilities. And that's what many people end up doing. Not many people. There's a few bad actors in the space who are actually successfully doing this. But that's not the only reason, I think, why hacking is happening. It's definitely an important mechanism that is used. But I also think that DeFi exploded onto the scene in 2020, 2021. Anyone could spin up a business and start custodying funds or start lending money out or doing more advanced smart contract businesses. And many people did. And a lot of those businesses ended up managing billions of dollars. And maybe the people who spun up those businesses weren't prioritizing cybersecurity and weren't really well set up to manage the quantities of money that they were using. And then on top of that, from the consumer side, we have people that don't want to miss the opportunity to make a lot of money in DeFi, and so are investing in platforms that are probably not well tested and potentially have these vulnerabilities because they decide, hey, I don't know much about this platform or the founders, but my friends told me to invest in this DeFi. I don't want to miss the opportunity to make a lot of money. So even though I don't know much about the security and how safe it is, I'm still going to invest anyway because I don't want to miss the opportunity to make money.
It's a bit ironic, Kim, because like you mentioned, the fact that actually all the DeFi code is open source, actually the hacker has full visibility, whereas for a centralized exchange or a traditional bank or whatever, you don't have that visibility. Like the TD Bank does not disclose to the public. It's how its vault operates, right? Whereas in DeFi, everything is out there. And you're right. I never thought about it from that perspective. It makes it easier actually for hackers to actually identify and trying to find vulnerabilities from that side. By the way, but do we have any kind of color on who are the bad actors behind these hacks? Is it North Korea? Is it Iranian hackers? Is it black hat hackers in the US? What kind of data do we have of who's behind these DeFi hacks?
By and large, the biggest attacker in terms of the success of which attackers are the most successful is North Korean hacking organizations. Earlier this year, there was a certain point where about 60% of all value hacked was directly attributable to North Korean hacking organizations such as the Lazarus Group. But that's not the only type of bad actor. We see some of these flash loan attacks are people in finance who are just taking advantage of the system and of the fact that smart contracts can be manipulated sometimes. And then there are attacks where we don't know who the threat actor is. But the cool thing about, and I'm going to do a little bit of a plug for the power of blockchain analytics here, is every time you hack a smart contract, we say that that's actually the hardest. That's not the hardest part. The hardest part is moving the money and getting away with the money, because we can see once you have those funds, all of the decisions you make on how to launder that money is available for anyone to see because it's on the blockchain. So we can trace where these funds are going, and we can see, hey, maybe there's a wallet that is holding stolen funds that's connected to another hack. So we're able to start making connections between bad actors just using blockchain analytics alone. And that is actually how we tend to identify if a hack is North Korean. So the most value is North Korea. But beyond that, anyone can participate, in theory, could participate in hacking open source code, because literally anyone in the world could become a potential abuser because of the fact that anyone can see this open source code.
And you're absolutely right. I always say half jokingly to my audiences that, if you're a hacker and you're using Bitcoin or any kind of stable coins, I mean, you're an idiot, because obviously the traceability tools that we have today are quite impressive. I mean, we saw many cases where crypto was one of the few instances, probably globally, where hackers had to return the funds just because they couldn't launder it. Let's say, from your perspective, Kim, today, let's say if somebody hacks for $100, what percentage of that can a person comfortably launder, let's say in small amounts, without being detected by the big exchanges and the traceability tools like you have today?
It's a good question, and you're not going to get a clean answer on that. But I will say that if you purchase investigative software like what Chainalysis offers, any amount that is connected to a hacker will be available for someone who is running a compliance program. And so they'll be able to see, did you know that funds indirectly connected to this hack that happened 3 days ago is now entering your exchange in intervals of $5? And so we do see a lot of structuring of payments happening depending on the threat actor. And that works to some degree in the sense that if you can't trace it directly to a source of illicit activity, maybe something like the travel rule won't kick in. But if you do have that connection on the blockchain to known stolen wallets, which we act fast. So if there's a hack, we know within a few hours because people usually contact us to investigate it. And then we are live tracing those funds. So if the exchange itself doesn't learn about it through using our software, we usually will alert them. And then that's how you go about seizing funds. And we've been seeing law enforcement seizing more and more funds because if we for example, trace a North Korean hack. And we recently announced that we seized $30 million of a recent North Korean hack back because the second it got to an exchange, we saw it, let them know, and they froze the funds.
Yeah, and especially now that there's these kind of mixers and are becoming not usable as soon as these hackers are trying to launder it. I guess the problem becomes as soon as these hackers are trying to move the money to cash at a centralized exchange, that's where I guess they're getting caught, right? That's the weak point for these hackers.
Yeah, that's the weak points, the conversion point. Everything you do before that is kind of a part of the money laundering process, and everyone has a different style of money laundering, if you will. And you can use mixers, you can use low KYC exchanges, although that's something, one thing that you said earlier was, hey, people aren't really hacking centralized exchanges. Well, there's less points of vulnerability on centralized exchanges these days as well, because many of them are really on top of collecting KYC information.
So actually, from what are the elements? And obviously, I think this is I'm happy, Kim, you mentioned this because obviously there's a lot of crypto transactions that are traceable, especially in case of bad actors. Are there any aspects of the crypto ecosystem that we're not able to trace? For example, I know mixers for a while, and obviously we saw the recent things on Wasabi, on Tornado Cash. I remember with the arrests that took place last summer, where $3.6 billion were confiscated. It was very interesting because for the first time we were able to demix mixers. At least it was the first time that publicly this was announced, and I found that it was very, very interesting. But let's say if now we are able to demix mixers, mixers like Tornado Cash are banned. So as soon as crypto touches that, it's flagged. Crypto exchanges, let's say by and large, are conducting KYC now. I would say all the big ones where there's liquidity. What are the weak points that are left in the crypto ecosystem that crypto money launderers are able to utilize right now?
It's a really good question. So then I think that there's the technical question of what advanced technologies like mixers are they using? And I'm going to kind of caveat my answer a little bit with one line I am constantly towing is how do I raise awareness around crypto crime activity without just educating the criminals of what we know? So how do I let people know that, hey, you should be aware of these types of mixers without letting the criminals know, oh, Chainalysis knows that these mixers are used, so we shouldn't use them anymore. So we don't like to get too specific on all the different services that we have advanced capabilities on, but we have really impressive R&D efforts across many different mixers, privacy coins, and things. And we like to think of traceability as kind of like a spectrum. So you have like the US dollar, which is if you have cash, that is really untraceable unless you have like a serial number and it just came right from an exchange. If you go and you hand someone in the street $1, that's gone. There's no record of it. It's highly untraceable. And then you have Bitcoin, which is highly traceable. Every transaction is available forever. We know about tens of thousands of services. And then you have a spectrum of everything in between, which might be privacy blockchains, Monero, mixing technologies, and the like. So from the technical side of things, we have R&D efforts across most major fronts of what criminals are using, including the Lightning Network and stuff. But what we're seeing hackers turning to now today is mixers have been a really big part of the ecosystem, and they haven't actually yet really adapted away from their use of mixers, but also OTC networks. This is, I would say, the biggest source of vulnerability in the network right now. This is a business that is informally set up, maybe plugging into the liquidity of an exchange where they operate as an over-the-counter network, and they just don't KYC their customers, or they don't care. This is what we saw with recently sanctioned Garantex and Suex. These are businesses. They're not necessarily blockchains or technologically advanced things. They're just people who spin up businesses and they don't go through the effort of KYCing. And Garantex and Suex, which were recently sanctioned, so much ransomware money was flowing through those services. And so we've seen the weakest link in this industry is really the fact that you can spin up one of these OTC networks and accept money, and accept illicit funds.
And I think it's a good point, because I have to say, over the years as well, having been in the industry for so many years, I can see that there are some of these OTC brokerage where, I hear about this buildings or 2-3 buildings in Moscow where a lot of these OTC brokers are, in some of these countries, right? Where really, frankly, these are weak points, right? And like you said, the big crypto exchanges, there's so much spotlight on them that they have to implement strict KYC. But probably these are some of the weak points on that side. Two other questions came in. I don't know if you're allowed to answer this, but I remember about a year ago, there was this kind of RFPs that were put out by some kind of government agencies asking whether to do research on tracing privacy coins. Where are we with the traceability features of Monero and other privacy coins? Where are we when it comes to being able to trace privacy coins? Are we there yet, or these coins are still private, or you're not allowed to answer?
My boss would say I'm not allowed to answer, but it's not that I'm not allowed to answer. It's just that it's an ongoing research effort, and we have very promising results on that front. And we've shown in the past, I think in our crime report, we talked about Monero transactions from this cybersecurity vulnerability called Glupteba, where Monero was being mined, and we had success with shutting that down through some more advanced tracing. So there are R&D efforts that we're putting out, and we're actually going to be, I don't want to scoop myself, but we're going to be really trying to highlight where we're at with that in our upcoming crime report, including looking at some investigations and whatnot. But it's certainly, like I said before, there's a spectrum of traceability, and privacy coins are more complicated, less traceable than Bitcoin, but that doesn't mean there's not options there.
Interesting. I know a lot of my privacy focused friends. This is some topic I'm sure they're following very closely. Another one, actually, in the same vein. What about mixers? Obviously, I read in recent reports we're finally able to demix mixers. We saw it with some of the arrests last summer. Where do you think we are? Are we able to demix mixers? Or again, it's a question that you're not allowed to answer? It's
one of those things that we don't want to highlight where the vulnerabilities are, because we don't want to make law enforcement's jobs harder down the road. And so we have discussed demixing capabilities to many successes, especially with North Korea. But we don't want to get much more specific on which mixers are impacted by our research and which ones are not, just so that we can make sure that we're not helping criminals get away with their illicit activity.
Fair enough. I think it would be like the Secret Service or law enforcement telling criminals how they investigate, right? Doesn't make any sense. I want to move it on to some other topic. Obviously, where we've been seeing a lot of the hacks in DeFi in the past couple of months has been on cross-chain bridges. Many of them that we've seen, the significant hacks were happening on these cross-chain bridges. why, first of all, why do you think cross-chain bridges have been such a big target? And second, do you have any data on how big is the problem with the specific vertical of hacks?
So bridges are actually not the biggest. They're not attacked with the most frequency. So this might be a few weeks old, but there's been about, let's see here, 21 bridge hacks this year and over 130 hacks altogether. But bridges are important because they tend to be the biggest. When you attack a bridge, you have access to a much larger source of funds because all of the funds are stored in kind of one place that are backing the funds that are on another blockchain. So there's this perception that there's hey, if you go after bridges, you're going to get access to a huge amount of money instead of scanning for DeFi protocols, and maybe you get access to a wallet that has a large quantity of money. But bridges are attractive because of the value that you can hack. And while bridge technologies and their vulnerabilities are somewhat of an unresolved technical challenge, because you have to be secure on 2 blockchains, a minimum, sometimes many more. But there's nothing inherently different about vulnerabilities with bridges that don't also apply to other DeFi protocols. It's about open source code vulnerabilities. It's about bug exploits. It's about finding your way in and finding a way. And that's true no matter what. The only other thing that I would point out with bridges is something that I think Vitalik pointed out in the past, which is that, let's say there's one bridge that is attacked and all of the funds are stolen. That can have cascading effects on other bridges as well. So that's more of a systemic risk challenge with the fact that blockchains might only be as secure as the most vulnerable blockchain when people are using so many bridges.
But don't you think, maybe I'm going to put my lawyer hat on for a second. I mean, there's obviously a difference between somebody really hacking a bridge, right? And then obviously what you referred before, somebody doing market manipulation, identifying a gap, especially with flash loans, a bit like we saw with Mango recently, for example. And then there's obviously hacks like on the processes where there's like a human mistake made by the team, like we saw with Ronin, for example, a couple of months ago. How do you see philosophically on your side? Do you think people that are coming in, getting a flash loan and exploiting the code, is that really a hack? Or you think there's a difference between that and proper hacking where they're coming in and stealing and getting the funds?
It's a really good question. And this isn't the only domain that this type of kind of linguistic specificity becomes challenging. So let's take hacking in general. Usually they hack someone someone gets hacked by sending a phishing link, which is considered to be a scam. So someone, the victim of a scam, is now all of a sudden losing their funds. Similarly, if you're scammed, a lot of these different types of crime don't fall into a clean bucket. And not to mention that with flash loans, some people are arguing that, hey, this isn't even illegal. I'm just taking advantage of the open source code that you offer. And I think the impact is that people are losing their money in a way that they didn't expect. And the mechanism through which it happens might be arbitrary. Did it happen through someone taking advantage of a bug or taking advantage of the ability to take out a flash loan, an uncollateralized loan, to manipulate the price? And furthermore, what about a pump and dump scam, which is the same concept? You're getting a lot of people together, you're colluding to inflate the price so that you can dump the price, so you can dump the asset and make a whole lot of money. You're doing this, you're colluding with people to manipulate the price, but that doesn't feel like a hack. Although the impact is the same as a flash loan, which is also the same as a hack. So a lot of these bleed together, and I think that we need to sort out. We need regulation. We need court cases to come and really prosecute some of these, so we can think about these different things with a little bit more clarity. But I'm certainly on board with you that someone, North Korea, going in and sneaking into your system feels a little bit different than someone lending themselves a loan and manipulating the price. of an asset.
Yeah, because you could argue that's a bit arbitrage of markets, right? Like it existed, but I think it's one. It's more philosophical at this stage than that. But actually, another question that is more on to get your personal view on it as well. It's interesting what I find that in crypto. Yes, right now traceability I think is playing in our advantage because we're able to keep the bad actors away. But I can argue that as we're moving to DeFi ecosystems, we're moving to businesses that could be stablecoin native, right? Today, for example, if I run a business and I'm operating only in crypto, if you find out my wallet address, you can pretty much reverse engineer my cash flows and really come up with my financials basically by reverse engineering, which ironically, if I make my payments via credit card systems or Swift bank transfers, has more privacy than using cryptocurrencies. And I talk about this in my last book as well, where there's a whole debate whether for crypto to move, I think we'll find it for the next couple of years, but really to move to the next step is actually one of the downsides of crypto that it's too traceable compared to the traditional centralized systems that we have. What's your view on that? Do you think that crypto's traceability on the long term could be actually a downside, although in the short term, there's a lot of upside because we're able to keep the bad actors away?
Yeah, I think cryptocurrency is really interesting because there's this push and pull. On the one hand, we know that the lack of transparency in traditional financial markets has led to these problems with shadow banking and money laundering at a scale that we can't even we don't even know how much money laundering is happening. There's using like US dollars and the euro. There are estimates, I think, between 2 and 5% of GDP, but we don't. That's a complete guess, if I'm being totally honest. No one has any idea the scale of the money laundering and ecosystem and people sending tax evasion. These are all problems that stem from a lack of transparency or at least an inability to enforce regulations. And we kind of just accept that that's how things have to be. That's how things are. And long term, does cryptocurrency present maybe an alternative view to just having to accept that, the big people, the people with all the money are able to evade taxes or send money to offshore accounts so that it's hidden? And so I guess cryptocurrency in a very philosophical way might present an alternative banking system view. Now, what technically would that look like? I don't quite know, but I can see your point that that right now if you see someone's cryptocurrency wallet, you can see all the trades that are happening, especially on DeFi. I would say we don't know whose wallet is whose, and no one is really collecting that information. So while what Chainalysis does is identify services, and so we know who Coinbase is, we know who Gemini is, but there's millions. I think last I checked, 180 million personal wallets that there's no information on them. Of course, the exchanges that are funding them have KYC, so or at least in theory they do. But blockchain traceability is not about doxing individual users. It's really about creating the phone book of cryptocurrency businesses so that people know what are we dealing with here on a broad scale.
I think, yeah, you're right, because actually like Chainalysis or any traceability company would not be able to see that that's my wallet, but actually that's what the benefit governments have. They can subpoena an exchange and be able to get that information, which is a different debate. But I think it's a very interesting point from that perspective. Kim, we have 2 minutes left, and then I'm going to do a quick fire round of questions, but I want to really quickly touch upon on your 2022 Geography of Cryptocurrency report. But one element when I was reading the report that I found very interesting is that in the US, DeFi has accounted for 37% of all North American crypto transaction volume. I found that data quite surprising. I actually think it's quite high. Just want to understand how come DeFi is so high, and actually if you think that's high or it's not.
DeFi is, in North America in particular, DeFi took off early. And I think that's the impact of the network effects of having a ton of engineers and seed money and investment money all in one place. It also took off in Western Europe as well first, and is only now really coming to places in Central and Southern Asia, for example, typically through the NFT or gaming space. But one other kind of technical reason why it's quite high is because every single trade you make is registered on the blockchain in DeFi, whereas in centralized exchanges, a lot of that is happening on the order book. So by default, DeFi activity tends to be, if you just look at the blockchain activity, it's going to be inflated because all of those other centralized exchange transfers or trades are happening on order books and they're not registered on the blockchain. So there is a technical reason why it's so high, but also another final thing I'll say is the transfers in DeFi on average tend to be higher than in centralized finance. There's more money, more like 10 million, 1 million, $5 million transfers that are going to these lending platforms, whereas centralized exchange activity, we see a much more diversity of service of transfer sizes from $1, $5, $10. So there's a few reasons for it, but I think that the answer is kind of a combination of all of those, especially since we know that DeFi is still, particularly in North America, kind of still an insiders club of a few people are dabbling in it, although NFTs did kind of bring in a broader usage, a broader audience of people, but it's still the real money is from a small group of people who are really invested in the space.
Yeah, I mean, no, I get your point on this, right? But I still have trouble. I think you're right because the majority of transactions taking place on exchange, on centralized exchanges, are in order book. They're not being, marked, if you want, on the blockchain from that perspective. So this is why it's a disproportionate amount. But I would argue, I'm not sure on that point if I agree, because I would say a lot of the big transactions taking place by the big market makers, by the big funds, are happening on exchange, right? And I would argue that ticket sizes on centralized exchanges are probably bigger than on DeFi exchanges. I mean, none of the big hedge funds, institutional players are even, or they're just touching DeFi, whereas most of them are trading on crypto exchanges, whether it's centralized, whether it's spot or derivatives, and so on and so forth, right? So I just want to say the data very, very unusual or interesting, because if you consider it as maybe 1-2 trillion, I don't know what's the exact amount last month of volumes on centralized exchanges, I have really trouble imagining that 37% of it is DeFi. But I think the reason why this number is so high that you explained makes sense from that perspective. One last question as well, Kim, before moving on to the fire round question is, obviously in the geography of cryptocurrency report, and we'll tell the audience where you can find the report, there was some interesting data on regarding countries and where usage is. Can you give me maybe the quick 30-second high-level highlights of the 2022 geography of crypto report, and what are some of the elements that shock you the most or surprise you the most from that perspective?
So the big takeaways are definitely the prevalence of emerging markets in the top of our adoption index. So Vietnam, India, Ukraine are all at the top. Pakistan, but for me, what was the biggest surprise, and I think I knew about this anecdotally, but seeing it in the data, was just how much DeFi adoption in Central and Southern Asia took off in the past year. We saw what we talked about before, that DeFi really started in North America and Western Europe, but in the past few quarters, even through the bear market, we've seen a growth in use cases in the Philippines, in play to earn in the Philippines, in Indonesia. In India, cricket trading cards. And so we've seen what I think we're at, and I think this is a broader takeaway in general, is where we're at with cryptocurrency more broadly is that, yes, you have the investment space, but what about bringing in brand new users, like day-to-day users, into using cryptocurrency? What we need is a real kind of killer app use case. And we've seen that coming from places like in India, where we have the cricket trading cards, and that's bringing in a new cohort of people into the fold. So yes, investors are going to kind of start to continue to invest part of their portfolio into cryptocurrencies, but day-to-day people who might think, hey, I missed the get rich quick wave with cryptocurrency, what we need for them to get on board are these actual use cases, and those are popping up dramatically in Central and Southern Asia.
Very interesting. I think for anybody interested in this topic, I have to say both reports, the Global Crypto Crime Report that you guys publish and the Geography of Crypto Report, are two reports that I love. And actually, I quote both of them in my last book as well, because I think it's very, very interesting. Kim, before I let you go, we're going to do a quick fire round of questions. The Bell is with me, follows me everywhere in the world, and it's with me here in Singapore this week. So I'm going to ask you quick questions, and I need a 1 or 2 word answer. And the Bell is here to keep us honest. Are you ready?
Okay. Yes.
Let's rock and roll. Kim, what's your favorite thing to do on weekends when you're not busy with finding criminals?
Cooking with my husband.
Okay, here we go. What's your favorite dish to cook?
Okay, it's not a dish, but we've been really into making homemade kombucha lately.
Ooh, Interesting. Very interesting. You mentioned you're a surfer. Where's your favorite place to surf?
Swami's in San Diego, although I'm stuck going to the Rockaways, which is a much worse break, but I still go.
You're obviously chasing criminals. What's a criminal activity that impresses you the most?
Okay, maybe what impresses me. There's a lot that does not impress me, but I guess the way that people are taking advantage of the smart contracts in kind of creative ways is something that I don't know if it impresses me, but it's a technical challenge that I find really exciting because of how everything is fair game to research and analyze on the blockchain.
What is the type of criminal activity that does not impress you?
Oh, the scammers. The scammers don't impress me at all. They go after the most vulnerable people, and it's just hard to watch.
I even have a podcast of scammers, how they use my name to create fake profiles. I think for listeners who are interested, it's in the podcast list. Another one, Kim, if you were ever going to join law enforcement, what agency would you love to join?
Ooh, that's a good one. I would like to join local law enforcement. They have some really kind of interesting cases. So, just local law enforcement agencies.
I love it. What's your favorite crime show or TV series?
I like the British ones, the British crime shows, like Broadchurch, and the ones that are just really slow and drawn out, but man, they end with a bang.
Here we go. And Kim, if you were the head of a regulator tomorrow, or even let's say law enforcement body, what is the one change you would do you think would really help in fighting crypto crime?
Definitely training of like the broad staff on how to carry out a cryptocurrency investigation. I'm gonna get the bell rung at me again, but there's every month there's more times where cryptocurrency investigations intersect with traditional crime, like in organized crime groups. And so having that skill set is going to break open cases that have felt cold in the past.
You live in Queens. What's your favorite thing about Queens?
Oh, it's the diversity of food, and it's like an onion in Queens. Every time I walk down Queens Boulevard, I find this new amazing kind of place that looks like a crappy business front, but it's got history. It's an onion layer, and I'm only like the third layer in right now.
As somebody with an Armenian background, I have to say I love the Armenian Greek restaurants there. It's a must have each time in Queens. And to finish it off, Kim Grauer from Chainalysis, thanks for being on the show with us. Kim, if you could have lunch or dinner with one person dead or alive, lunch or dinner with one person dead or alive, who would you have lunch with?
Oh gosh. Okay, I'm just going to say the first thing that popped into my head, which was Christopher Hitchens. I don't know if that's true, but man, I would want to see what he thought about how things about our current kind of world and situation. But
I love it, Kim. Kim, where can people find you, and where can they find these recent reports you guys published?
On our website, Chainalysis, and we can download our reports just directly on our website.
Well, thank you very much, Kim, guys. Thank you very much, everybody, for again. Hopefully, you enjoyed this episode. There's a lot more we could have gone into, but I really want to make sure that we share with you some of these big developments that are taking place when it comes to crypto crime and some of the developments going on. Again, if you like the show, please give us a big 5-star rating and make sure you share it to help us more people discover the show. Guys, thank you very much, everybody. It was great to have you with us, and see you all next time.